You may be surprised to hear that at my seminary, where I studied to be a priest, the food they served was actually good. Not what I expected, but it was really good. Like seconds and thirds good. And the problem was that it was all buffet. Breakfast was a buffet, lunch was a buffet, dinner was a buffet. And unless it was Lent or a special retreat, there was also always dessert. They'd have flourless chocolate cake, 7-layer Nutella bars, Mexican flan. I realized just a little while in, I can't do this. I cannot be having dessert every night. So I started to find a way to control myself, and I made a rule. If it wasn't homemade, I wasn't going to eat it. It had to be homemade. And that worked until I found out that one of my favorites, the carrot cake that was so good, was store-bought, off of the restaurant truck. It was so good, but part of what made it good was corn syrup and preservatives. And so I had to go back to my commitment. If it's not homemade, it's not going on my tray. It's got to be authentic. It's got to be the real thing. And that's a little bit of what we're hearing from John the Baptist today, when he is getting all of the attention and being held up as what people thought was the Messiah. People said, we want you. We've seen all the other prophets, but you are the best we've ever seen. And Jesus told them that. Of everyone who was ever born, John the Baptist is the greatest. But John the Baptist, as you heard in the gospel, was very clear on who he was and who he was not. And so he said, I'm good, okay? I'll give you that. But I'm not Messiah good. I'm not that good. It's almost as if, to go back to the analogy, he was like, I'm like a plate of Chips Ahoy. And the Messiah is like Nona's almond paste cookies. If you've tasted Nona's almond paste, you don't call Chips Ahoy cookies. That reveals a spiritual lesson for us that is always right there. It's always a temptation. We are always tempted to settle for just short of the real thing, just shy of the real thing. That's why there's products out there called, I can't believe it's not butter. It's almost butter. If you close your eyes and hold your nose, it's butter. But it's not though. It's not. It's an imitation. Just like that carrot cake was imitating homemade. But imitation is so good sometimes, it can actually distract us from the real thing. The biggest threat to your mom's homemade whipped cream that she makes from scratch is Cool Whip. Because it forms stiff peaks. And it's just so easy. You just go and get it, and it's perfect and ready to go. So John the Baptist is telling us, you are going to be tempted to want to call just shy of the Messiah, your whole life. You're going to want to settle for imitation because so often it's good, it's really good, it's good enough, and it's easier. What a lot of us might not realize is at the time of John the Baptist, there were people who were more excited about him than they were about Jesus. He actually had a following that kind of rivaled Jesus for a time, because people would come and they'd see John the Baptist and then they'd see Jesus and they'd say, I think I like John better. He's more radical, he's more exciting, he eats grasshoppers, he lives in the desert. This other guy, he's not as exciting. So John the Baptist had to tell them, you're trying to settle for something just shy of the real thing. You want the ultimate, but you're settling for the penultimate. I learned the word penultimate when I was learning Spanish. I found out that Spanish is one of the easiest languages in the world to pronounce if you don't know how to pronounce the words, because almost every word in Spanish puts the accent on, as my Spanish teacher told me, the penúltimo. You put your accent on the penúltimo, the second to last syllable in the word, the penultimate one. Not the last one, not the ultimate, but the penultimate. And that is the word that describes John the Baptist. Jesus alone is the Messiah. He's the ultimate. John was just shy. And people were happy to settle for just shy. That happens to us all the time, too. Because the ultimate is hard to access sometimes. It takes work. It takes commitment. And so Chips Ahoy is pretty good. And so we settle for that. In religion, that can show up whenever we have an emphasis on anything other than God or Jesus. When our desire is for something in the neighborhood of God, in the neighborhood of Jesus, but not quite, we find ourselves getting distracted by the penultimate. We settle for the bagged cookies or the imitation butter. And that can even happen sometimes doing the thing that we're trying to do to get close to God. For example, the penultimate, the John the Baptists of the world, are trying to direct us to what's the most important. And that's, for example, what the church does. The church is here to bring you close to God. But for some people, it's close enough. Let's stop here. I'll just go to Mass, and then that'll be it. I'll settle for really close to God, really close to Christ, but not go all the way. That's what happens sometimes when we treat Mass like, okay, I'm good. I've got my religion thing down. I went to Mass today, check. And we feel like we've encountered God. And of course we have. We come to Mass to encounter God. But sometimes we can let coming to Mass or practicing our favorite devotion almost take the place of the ultimate purpose. For some of us, the rosary is what it's turned into being all about, or about going to Mass or another certain devotion. It's what it's all about. But of course, that's always supposed to be what leads us to what it really is all about. Theologians have this image to help us understand this. They say, on the night that there's a beautiful full moon, someone who wants you to experience that can point their finger toward the moon. And you may be tempted to look at the finger instead of following the finger to what it's pointing to. It's such an interesting image that we can stare at the finger instead of looking to see where it's pointing. The finger is not the moon. It's leading you to the moon. John the Baptist wasn't the Messiah. He was leading us to the Messiah. The church isn't the destination. It's the way to the destination. So this week, it would be good for us to sort out in our own lives how this dynamic shows up. How are we getting the penultimate mistaken as the ultimate? The thing we have to realize is, whatever it is that is distracting us from the ultimate, it's probably very, very close. The biggest threat to Nona's cookies is not Brussels sprouts. No one's choosing Brussels sprouts over Nona's cookies. They're choosing Nabisco. The biggest threat is not in the opposite direction. It's right there. It's very, very close. The biggest threat to creme fraiche is Cool Whip. And for a lot of us, we have to see, what is the biggest threat to my going as far as I'm meant to go in my relationship with God? It could be something so close that it's just distracting us. It's a religious practice that we would kind of like to substitute for God because it's so cozy for us. But we're always meant to push further and go beyond. By the way, that carrot cake at the seminary, I found out that it had 900 calories a slice. So settling for the penultimate can cost you. Let's make a commitment today to let God alone, Jesus alone, be at the center, and let everything else just lead us closer to that ultimate goal.